What I'd like to see, Canada become our 51st state. We give them protection, military protection. We don't need them to build our cars. I'd rather see Detroit or South Carolina or any one of our Tennessee, any one of our states build the cars. They could do it very easily. We don't need them for the cars. We don't need them for lumber. We don't need them for anything. We don't need them for energy. We have more energy than they do. We don't need them for energy. If people wanted to play the game right, it would be 100% certain that they'd become a state. But a lot of people don't like to play the game because they don't have a threshold of pain. And there would be some pain.
After his latest round of threatening tariffs for the sake of only making himself look like a master negotiator, Donald Trump ran to celebrate to the media so that no one would realize how little he actually did.
I had a great talk with Mexico, and we had President Sheinbaum is a woman. I like her very much. We've had good relationships, but we have to stop fentanyl from coming in, whether I like somebody or not, and we have to stop the illegal aliens from coming in. I think we've lost 200,000 people on average a year for many years, much higher than the 100,000. Could be even closer to 300,000. And they've agreed to put in 10,000 soldiers permanently, like forever, 10,000 soldiers at their side of the border and stop fentanyl and illegal aliens from coming into our country. They have a big incentive to do. Other than that, we've agreed to talk and consider various other things. We haven't agreed on tariffs yet, and maybe we will, maybe we won't.
His tariffs went into effect over the weekend, and when both Mexico and Canada responded in retaliation, it was time for the self-proclaimed deal maker to act like he fixed another problem that he started. The only problem is that he's so wrapped up in his own propaganda, he didn't even realize that everyone already knows that the concessions he's claiming were already secured before he ever entered office.
He said he had a good call with Trump. He said that Canada is going to be implementing a $1.3 billion border plan where they talk about reinforcing the border. I should note that's actually something that Trudeau announced and Canada announced back in December. President Trump is declaring victory for now in his trade standoffs with Mexico and Canada, with the president pausing for at least the next month on actions that could have dramatically increased prices for Americans on everything from cars to avocados. That was after his first phone call with Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau today, but before his second one. I was there in the East Room shortly after that second call had ended. Trump here overall seems to have won an agreement where Canada is really going to do what it was already going to do. The Prime Minister saying this $1.3 billion border plan that he announced back in December is going to go into place. And as for Mexico, this is how President Trump explained that result.
They've agreed to put in 10,000 soldiers permanently, like forever, 10,000 soldiers at their side of the border and stop fentanyl and illegal aliens from coming into our country.
According to Mexico's defense ministry, there are already 15,000 troops nearly there on the border.
So just like the whole TikTok threat, this guy started a fire, started yelling about how someone else lit the match, then stood on top of his desk to open up his suit jacket to reveal a Superman logo so that clueless supporters will continue to think that he's saving them. But in reality, he's saving them from himself. You know, it's such an obvious game. This guy that looks a lot like me floated the possibility of him doing all this just to claim that he and his tariffs strong-armed the rogue nations of Canada and Mexico, forcing them to fold like a lawn chair and solidify the power of constant tariffs. Now think about it. Who determines if and when Trump's targets have lived up to this arbitrary statement about the flow of drugs? It's setting the stage for a manufactured superiority contest where Trump will make claims about how great it worked, not by any established measure, but simply because he said so. They're gonna say whatever arbitrary thing that they say, the 43 pounds of fentanyl from Canada, they're gonna, whichever point they wanna point this out, mission accomplished, it's done. Because they wanna, again, eliminate actual information, and the only information you get is from the fascist leader in the White House. Then he'll say, mission accomplished, it's done. People aren't dying of fentanyl anymore. So that whole agreement of 10,000 Mexican troops at the border to stop this flow of fentanyl, that was agreed to before. That was agreed to under Biden's administration. There's been agreements that happen with Mexico and things that they were trying to do to mitigate these types of things, helping with issues at the border, sending troops, all these types of stuff, sending $1.5 billion. All of that happened already. Oh man, look, I put those 25% tariffs on them and they folded by doing the exact same damn thing that they already did. they already agreed to without those drops in the stock market. I hope people don't forget that even though he played a make-believe game of negotiations for the past few days, it still had a negative effect on business and the economy. Companies and small businesses that rely on materials that are imported immediately didn't know where or how soon they'd be able to either replace those items or pay a higher cost for them. This was just from the threat, by the way. And the next time that he decides to threaten more allies with tariffs, there's a chance that folks won't trust his erratic behavior from one day to the next, causing instability and uncertainty in how they invest in their businesses. But none of that really matters to a president whose main objective is to create artificial scenarios where he can then play the role of savior.
Quantify what the actual impact is here. For people saying, look, the market bounced back, no tariffs were put into place, Trump got what he wanted, all's well, we'll do this again in 30 days. Is that kind of the reality from an economic perspective?
I mean, I don't know what Trump wanted in this situation. Again, he didn't actually get anything. But if he were to put these tariffs in place, they would be very painful for American consumers. Okay, Scott. I mean, this is public information.
He got what he wanted. He got an agreement from our neighbors to do more on the border. That's what he wanted, and he got it.
Exactly what they have already been doing.
I understand you're the minister of propaganda tonight, but you don't have to be. You could just say, "Hey, all's well that ends well." Here, come on.
If you don't know that these countries are committing to do exactly what they have already been doing, either you haven't done your homework or you think the American people are idiots. Because again, they're doing
option three. Donald Trump is enforcing what needs to be done at the border, which is more help from our friends. They are our allies and they are important people, but they need to help us, and they've not been helping us, and now they're going to help us even more.
They have been.
But the point is that it's also
ask every family with a fentanyl death how much they've been helping.
Yeah, we already know that Scott Jennings serves his role as the blind loyalist that spins everything that's blatantly clear about Trump's actions and then recreates it as the most amazing accomplishment anyone has ever seen. But the last target of Trump's trifecta of trade wars is the only one that he wasn't able to spin as a win when no changes were actually made. Maybe that's why he wasn't talking about China.
A fresh trade war between the US and China has just kicked off. An hour and a half ago, the US went ahead with its promise of 10% tariffs on all Chinese goods headed to the US. China quickly responded and announced it's to do the same in a tit-for-tat spat that could impact the global economy. China's finance ministry is saying the measures against US goods would take effect next Monday. An extra 10% tax will be added to goods including crude oil and agricultural machinery. Imports of coal and liquefied natural gas will be hit with 15% tariffs. It's also saying it's filing a complaint with the World Trade Organization over the action from the US.
This is why Trump has abandoned his day one, week one, and month one promise of lowering costs on everything from eggs to gas prices. There aren't any previous agreements in place that he can adopt as his own and pass off as his genius at work. And with China, all he can do is tell supporters that they'll understand his promise to lower costs was just an exercise in making them look like idiots.
There are strategic considerations that we should talk about, too, that could benefit China. Critics are saying that the chaos that's being created could push other countries like Europe to strengthen trade with China as a counter to what's seen as unreliable trade agreements with the U.S. Remember, too, Beijing has also been investing very heavily in the EV industry and clean energy, solar panels, at a time when President Trump has also said that the U.S. is going to back away from those types of investments. So Beijing is saying it still wants a stable relationship with the U.S., but China is saying that these tariffs are a serious violation of international trade rules.
The deal maker forgot that stomping around and telling allies that we don't need them is an isolation move that eventually pushes more partners to make agreements with more stable countries so that they don't have to put up with Trump's ego-driven tariff threats every month. His white supremacist mindset tells him that without the MAGA mafia, no one in the world can survive. It's the exceptionalism line that we Americans are taught from birth, without a system in place to offer that exceptionalism to citizens that they think are inferior. We see it in their approach to vital elements of society like education, employment, and housing. So The claim that China is the end-all, be-all source for our widespread drug addiction problems in this country is just a ploy to blame our shortcomings on where the drugs are coming from. We never stop to ask what's wrong with our support for Americans that end up on these drugs, and why don't we tackle the provable societal issues that lead to the homeless community all the way up to the ultra-rich, like Elon Musk, to have a demand for these drugs. Drugs that won't call for a huge supply to be smuggled in from foreign countries without the astronomical demand from Americans that are addicted to them. We don't want to answer that question because it would require our government to invest in our citizens at a rate that would anger the oligarchs that demand that those resources are saved for them only.
This move of President Trump to invoke national security to unravel long-standing trade agreements is China takes exception to this and to the accusation that it's been doing too little to stop the flow of fentanyl. The Ministry of Public Security released a statement today saying China was the first country in the world to officially schedule fentanyl-related substances as a class in 2019. The Foreign Ministry also added to that today, fentanyl is an issue for the U.S. In the spirit of humanity and goodwill, China has given support to the U.S.'s response to this issue. The U.S. needs to view and solve its own fentanyl issue in an objective and rational way instead of threatening other countries with arbitrary tariff hikes. That from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. Beijing has long said that if the U.S. wants to control the opioid crisis, it has to look at demand and, in China's eyes, not put the blame on other countries.